let me talk about the kit, but more than just the kit. I have to say this, and everybody has to understand this, okay? I was talking to Elizabeth on the bus yesterday, and one of the things that we both agreed to that has to be stressed, materials don't teach, teachers teach, okay? Books don't teach, teachers teach. This is nice. These are paper goods. These are a way to help you get organized, a way to help you keep records, all right? And one of the things that we do is we give you a first copy. And what I'm talking about is everything you have a complete go with materials for 30 students, okay? You also have the responsibility, not just the right, but you have the responsibility to duplicate these materials, okay? If you run out of a certain item, it's your responsibility to make arrangements with a copy center to get more. One of the other caveats I want to mention to you is we learned a lot by experimenting. And if you learn to do something better while doing EOL, you have to share it with us, because we will change, and we will change, and we'll do something your way. This is a product that's constantly in process. It's being field tested by teachers. We expect the feedback from teachers to tell us how to do it better, okay? If you have a material and it happens to be printed on cardstock, okay? It's printed on cardstock, and everybody knows what I mean, the hard paper, okay? Then what we want you to do is duplicate it on cardstock. It's not such a big deal. That means talk to the person who's ever in charge of your copy machine. Cardstock is not significantly more expensive, but it is a lot more durable. I can't say to this little second grader, please take this home and bring it back. It's printed on flimsy paper. It doesn't work, okay? There's related materials that you will see in your manual that you need to go out you need to go out and purchase, and they're all listed in here, all right, to run an EOL room, that are out of the ordinary for school supplies. For example, one of the things that we ask you to do is please go buy Ziploc bags, all right? That's an unusual educational tool. Maybe you do it already. But because we want you to make sure that you train your children to be respectful of the books that they're going to be going home with every night. So we ask you to put the book that they're taking home in a Ziploc bag. We call them book bags. Does everyone have their book bag? And in that book bag, there are a lot of things that are related to EOL. For example, there's a book. There's liable to be a tape. There's their vocabulary flashcards. There's the pencil that they just purchased at the vocabulary station because they don't have a lot of pencils and pens at home, all right? Or whatever the situation is, this becomes their bag that's going to come into this room with them. And as I say to teachers all the time, my thousands of kids are so used to seeing me, and if they're coming into the room, they're going to hear from myself or Dr. Brown, good morning, you look wonderful today. You have your book bag? You know, and they're so used to showing us their book bag when they come in the building, or when they come into the room, or when they leave the room. We expect them to have their book bag. This is what we do. What we do in our classrooms is read and write about things that we're interested in. Okay, I don't mean to be lecturing as much as telling you about the kit. That's what I need to do, tell you about the kit. But this kit does not teach kids how to read. You do. Okay. Almost every EOL classroom I go into, you know, we travel quite a bit all over the country, and it's quite often for Dr. Brown to turn to me and say, Dr. Murray, I need you to do the vocabulary station now. And we have learned that we need a portable kit, like those white boxes in the back of the classroom, okay? Because each one of those drawers contains all the elements of the station. When this is delivered to your school, you have to open it up and separate it according to each station. This is my story station, this is my vocabulary station, this is my phonics station. It doesn't take much more than these two crates to hold your entire Essentials of Literacy program. This program is designed to teach children how to read in the most cost-effective way possible, okay? We don't sell books, okay? We don't say, oh, here, this leveled reader produced by the Essentials of Literacy School Development Program, here, with this wonderful package comes $6,000 worth of books, okay? No, we don't do that. We want you to be able to start this program in your school with the materials that are existing in your school, except for a few fringe things. We'd like you to get some water bottles. We'd like you to get some pencils. We'd like you to get some Ziploc bags, all right? We know that every station, okay, needs a record-keeping system. We can't just say we teach kids vocabulary words. I want to know what vocabulary words you teach to your kids. We can't say that I read stories to my kids. Okay? You know, I work an awful lot with student teachers, volunteers in classrooms, and if I have a really, really good student teacher and teacher, most of those student teachers and teachers are, I can walk into a second grade classroom and I can say things to them like, do you read to your kids every day? Oh, absolutely, we're getting the job done. We read our kids a story every day, okay? That doesn't work in an EOL room. We say something different. We say, do you make sure your kids get 5 or 6 stories every day? Now, if I walked into most teachers, think of yourself as a classroom teacher, and I said, do you read your kids 5 stories a day? They look at you like you're out of your mind. What are you talking about? I got 30 kids. I have all kinds of things to do. I can't just be reading to kids all day. We don't believe it's possible for a student to go through Essentials of Literacy without getting about 5 stories a day. What makes it successful? That's one of those things. Ask me where those stories come from. Well, we read stories to our kids every day. They're going to go to the story station. They're going to take home a book every day, right? They're going to have a listening station, okay? They're going to have a guided reading station. You see how it just, you know, Dr. Joyner referred to it early. He said, what makes kids readers is time spent reading, not doing almost reading things, you know, but doing real reading things. I can follow them around with a stopwatch, and I can see that this child actually has a book in his hand and is reading. That's what makes it happen. So what we have to, we ask them to do so much of it, we have to add the enthusiasm and joy to it, okay? And we have found that, you know, I can't tell you how wonderful it is to meet with parents. And when a parent comes up to me, and they always want to ask this question. If there's a parent night and I get parents there, the first question that I always get is, how is my son or daughter doing in reading? Well, I don't just answer that question anymore. Now I show them, okay? I say, well, let's go get his reading book, his Essentials of Literacy book, and let's see what it says, okay? Now, as you know, in the kit, we have a book like this for every student. We also have the Teacher's Master Manual, okay? Now, I want to tell you, if you get your kit, you're to take this and put it in a very secure place. Because if you run out of BL cards or you run out of something, you don't have anywhere to get another copy of it unless you secure your master copy. Everyone understand that? Okay. I like to say to the kids on the first day, I say, we're going to start a new reading program. You're going to love it. And the first thing we have to do is give you all your presents. Okay? Kids like to get presents. So what we're going to do is, see these new notebooks? We have new notebooks for everybody. We have these new stickers for everybody. We have a record-keeping card for each station. Now the parents come in to me and they say, what's my son or daughter doing? And I say, well, this is what he's doing in phonics. And that's really easy to do. In his classroom reader, he has read, well, let me see. This is the 15th story that he's read. But then there's another thing. You see, if it's made out of cardstock and it's completed in your classroom, this needs to be filed. We don't give you a 2-drawer filing cabinet, okay? But you need to have a file on each one of your students. These are the guided reading books. When this is full, when this is filled, okay, he needs to be able to turn to you and say, my classroom reader card is filled. Can I get another one? There needs to be a place like this where they can go, get another classroom reader card, and you take the card that they have and you put it in the 2-drawer filing cabinet in the file with their name on it. Does everyone understand how that piece of organization? It's terribly important. My classroom reader. After their classroom reader cards, you have books I have recorded. We have a list of the stories they have listened to. We have a list of books that have been read to them. Okay? Now, if they're getting 5, maybe 4 or 5 book experiences a day, you can imagine that suddenly there's nothing as satisfying as saying, well, your son has read 35 books, he's listened to 25 books, he's recorded 6 books, and all this stuff is happening, and we have the proof of it, we have the evidence of it. Stories that I'm writing, pull out that storybook, wave that story. Well, let's take a look at how he's writing, all right? The parent says, well, I was just really uncomfortable because I didn't think he was reading enough. Oh, really? Well, let's take a look at his take-home contract and see how many times you have signed it, that you have read with your child at night. Oh, gee, there does seem to be a problem here. Everybody got it, And we have a real history of this. And one of the things I want to warn you about is a caveat about the vocabulary station. Remember, I said we don't give the students the 220 Dolch words anymore. We give them over 1,000 words. I see teachers make the mistake of when they get their kits and they have the notebooks for the kids and they seem to think the notebook should be filled up. So they give the kids all the record-keeping cards, and then they give the kids all 1,200 words, the word list. No. You only give the students the word list that they're working on. You have those in your drawer. You're finished with word list 1, that's great. That's a word wall, boom, let's get your word list. Get your word list, the second 100 words and the third 100 words, okay? One of the things that maybe everyone didn't understand when we were doing the vocabulary station, and just because it came to me, I wanted to mention, why do we have word list 1? Because word list 1 is the phonetically irregular words on the word list that we find kids have the most trouble with. It's not the word list that you begin teaching with. You begin teaching with word list number 2, word 1. Because all those funny words are on this list, like Wednesday. Everybody understand what I mean there? And I have fun when we come to these words. I have fun with the kids in these words. And one of my favorite ones is father. How do you spell father? It's really fat her, right? Fat her, that's what you call your father? No, you do all that kind of stuff with them. But you teach these as fun, challenging words. Okay, now, so what you're actually getting is you get a package of all these things. You get a package of all the blend cards. You get your master manual. You get your story books. You get your vocabulary books. You get erasers, markers. Let me see. The blue books, the tape recorders. This is what comes in the package. Now, and the manual. The manual becomes your Bible. It tells you step by step everything that needs to be done at each station. Some little other tricks that we've learned, you'll get a whole box of the additional supplies, the tapes, okay? The tapes, my favorite little red Apple timers. A little timer that clicks off, okay? So we think that you can open these packages and be ready to start EOL. What I'm going to strongly advise is don't anybody start EOL until you have collectively taken your strengths, set up your room, set up your stations, actually had your materials, and turned around and said, well, okay, I've taught these people how to do the phonics. Now I want to see them do it, and don't start too early. Don't start unless you're satisfied. If you dry run it with the professionals and you say, wait a minute, this didn't go right, I got to go back to the manual. I've got to get more information. I've got to pick up the phone and get in touch with Dr. Brown and find out what we should be doing here. I think it'd be terribly deflating to any of you to start without an appropriate drive. Don't be in a rush. You are going to be in a rush pushing those kids for the rest of the year, okay? And don't start it unless you feel secure and you've got all the pieces in place. Okay? Are there any general questions that I could answer now? Any other general questions that people have?
That you showed us, the student notebook?
Yes. Blue notebooks are student notebooks.
Does that ever go home, or does that stay in the EOL room?
At the end of the year, when a student's done with it, he's going to learn to love it. I have seen teachers try to hold on to them, but it usually goes home with them with the tape of their recorded progress for the year at the end of the year. Okay? You know, and I also tell people, if I have someone who's in charge of the phonics station, you know, and they're running out of cards, someone's got to be responsible to turn around and say, okay, the facilitator, the head of the classroom, has to make sure that all of the supplies are there. If you go to the station and, you know, and there's a piece missing, well, then it didn't work. Yeah, and you've got 4 kids that are off task.
When they take home their book bag with their parents to sign
Right.
every day,
Yes.
let's say that's get lost.
Give them another one.
Is it a good idea to keep a Xerox copy so that when you do have a parent-teacher conference, you have an extra copy in case along the way they get lost?
Yeah, I don't get too crazy about that. Because, what I usually do is, you know, a contract is only going to last a week. We have actually 2 designs. We have a contract that lasts a week, and we think that we need to go to one maybe that lasts a month at a time. Because you're constantly remaking. Every week, I have a day where I'm going to say to my students, okay, today's the day we collect your old contract. I think it says on it we do it on Mondays. We collect your old contract and we give you a new contract. Of course they get lost, all right? I mean, one of the things that, you know, when I say I really put the emphasis on kids entering and leaving the classroom with that book bag, because just they're walking in and out, I know whether they have their contract or whether it went home or not. And I like to say all the time, okay? The tradition of sending books home with kids is send the book home with them, and they don't get another book till they bring that one back. If they lost the book, they don't get another one. Okay? Well, we got a lot of kids who lost that book in 3rd grade and they haven't taken another book home since now, you know? Okay? Because someone wouldn't let them. Okay, that's not what we're about. We're not, what we're about is making sure that they have another book and another book. And sometimes it comes to the reality of, look, I'm going to have to contact the parents. Look, I'm going to have to go to the house. I got to get some of these books back. You know? What I do is I stop giving them the hardbound children's literature that I personally own that cost me $20 a copy. You know? But I still, you know, I make sure that, look, come on, sweetheart, I'm sorry. You forgot your book bag today? Well, you got to try harder tomorrow. Bring back another book and another book and another book until I've done it, until I've exhausted it. I'm never going to not let those children go home with books. Okay?
Yesterday when we left for after the writing portion, I was real confused because we went from writing on the sentence strips to creating a major story. And my question was, well, how soon did that take place? And it was clarified to me that the sentence strip writing is probably going to be a couple of months process. Because remember we went from Dr. Brown to Ms. Brantley, and I was trying to figure out how do we get from writing on the strips to a whole illustrated, published book. And she said that that portion doesn't happen until maybe later in the year. And I didn't know if anybody else was confused, but I know I was real confused on that one.
Okay. Thanks for mentioning that. I wanted to say though, in terms of the sentence strips, again, the sentence strip you only use with the child, or perhaps with the few students that are really struggling. Those students who really don't want to take the effort to write during the first week or so, or really can't because they have been experiencing such difficulty for such a long time and therefore have internalized that I can't attitude. And so for the first few weeks or so, or first couple weeks or so, you would want to try to do the sentence strip by taking the dictation from that less skilled writer. But very often, as I mentioned yesterday, you won't find more than one of those 4 students who will need the help with the sentence strip. So in the first few weeks, you will find that there are students, including the one with whom you're working with the sentence strip, who will be doing their publishable copy. Because remember again, I mentioned yesterday that when you first start the program, you will be putting perhaps between 5 to 10 of those student stories together. And I mentioned too that the first few stories will be short. They perhaps will be, for some students, 3 sentences per story or 5 sentences per story, 1 page from the book that, the My Story book, perhaps 1 page on the book. And then as the weeks progress, you will find that same child who might start to write 3 pages for the story, or then later on 5 or so pages for a story. And so after you have collected about 5 to 10 stories, then you do go to your publishable copy. But what you mentioned, though, I thought was a very good point, because after I talked about what you would do with those students, and Lynn talked about what she did in terms of the who, the what, and so forth, and the elaboration and so on, then I could understand how some people would say, if these students are struggling so much, how am I going to go right into elaborating the story? When do I make the switch? And I thought that was an excellent question. When do I make the switch? And as I mentioned yesterday, you certainly can merge certain aspects of what I said with what Lynn says, because you're going to be monitoring your students very closely, and you will know when they are ready for you to introduce some higher concepts into whatever you're doing. But you're going to start off, if your children who are coming to you, say you're starting at 3rd grade, and you have students who are coming to you in the reading room who are reading for the most part, on the average, at a kindergarten level, or reading pre-primer or primer, then you're going to spend the first few weeks just helping them to develop a love for writing. And so start off again with your webbing. Every Monday morning, your title page writing, and them going in and using their books to write their own stories, and then you're editing with them and so forth on a Wednesday or a Thursday. Or perhaps for some of those students, the editing won't take place during the first week when they're writing. They might write a story, and their story could take from Monday through Friday for them to finish a story. Or Monday through Friday, the students, or some of those students, might be just halfway through the special story that they're writing. And Monday when they come in, all of them participate in the webbing or the brainstorming, but 2 students of the 4 students might not start a new story. They might continue an old story that they started the week before that they just had not finished. So you might find 1 or 2 students who might take 2 weeks to finish a story, and that's okay. It is not a rush job. We're going to give each of those students the chance to write the story until each person feels that I have finished my story. So it could take 2 weeks for a student to finish a story. It perhaps might even take 2.5 weeks to finish a story. If the story is really personal to that child and really interesting to that child, it could take that long. So it's okay to just work with the child. Again, remember I said yesterday that EOL takes into consideration the individual variation of every child. But as the weeks progress, and perhaps even, and I would take a guess to say, maybe the 3rd month or so, you might find that there are some students that are ready for that elaboration stuff. And the reason why I asked Lynn to mention this, because generally when we do EOL training, we don't even get into this. This is a New Haven stuff that they've added. But I've asked her to do it because, again, we're making the training video, and I want to make sure that that is an option for folks. But one reason why we did it too is because some of the classroom teachers were saying after 3 months or so that the students are not writing enough. That our kids in the EOL room, they're not writing as much as the other students at in their classroom at the 3rd grade level. And so the concern was, how can we build in more writing and writing at a higher level for these kids? And that's why they built that aspect in.
The whole idea is not the quantity of stories that you put out, all right? It's the amount of time you spend writing, editing, and going through the processes of writing, okay? The drafting, the first, from, I call it from what are the
Pre-writing,
phrases I always use?
brainstorming?
From sloppy copy to perfect paper, I mean, it's the process of how I get from there. Just like when we all easily understand the analogy of, the important part of reading is how much actual time they spend reading. The important part of writing is how much actual time they spend writing. It doesn't make any difference which story it's on. And as Dr. Brown said, our curriculum will tell us what themes they want us to write about. Your theme may be neighborhood, maybe friends, maybe whatever is developmentally appropriate for your kids. But within those themes, within your neighborhood, okay, what happens in your story is not going to finish for everyone at the same time. You know, you have those holidays that are very special to you. You know, it's like Thanksgiving is a Thanksgiving story. Yeah, you draw a turkey. Or Thanksgiving is where I go to South Carolina and visit my grandmother every year. And this year my grandmother isn't there, and I got a whole lot to say, and I can't have it done by Friday. But it's so important to me that the process of writing that story is liable to take a couple of weeks. I don't miss anything by not writing the next story, which is about Christmas shopping, you know, because I'm still working on what's important to me.
Does that help in terms of getting to this? Okay. And I'm glad you asked, because yesterday when we were doing it, I sat at the back of the room and I'm thinking, now I think we have confused folks a little bit in terms of, you know, when the switch is made and when we do the merging of the two, okay? Other questions, so this will be your chance to ask whatever lingering questions you have, make whatever comments you have, because in another half an hour or so, we shall be saying ta-ta, goodbye, have a great trip, and so forth. Go ahead, please.
My question is around delivery of the kits.
Uh-huh.
When can we expect that?
After folks have made all the arrangements, they know they want the program, like you and I also have talked, Janice. And so, you know, you just tell me when you're ready for the materials. And you also told me you were ready. So if you're ready on Monday, your materials could be shipped off to you too. Because Yale Printing has all the kits already stacked. And so they're just waiting to hear from me, where do I send the next kit to? So whenever you're ready, it's on its way. Question over here, please.
If we decide to set up a room, dedicate this room to reading room, and we have the third grade session come in 2 hours, when they leave the room, to better utilize the room, we have a session for the fourth graders on level 1 coming. Is that too overwhelming for the 6 adults that's in that room to do 2 sessions per day?
If I was to absolutely utilize a reading room to the max, and I had the facilities and the staff to do it, let me tell you, if you're doing vocabulary and you're doing it for 2 hours, and you're doing it for 2 hours, and you're doing it for 2 hours, you're going to go out of your mind. But if you have a staff that knows each other and can rotate stations and do other stations and have an expertise in more than one area, of course it can be done. And I have seen schools have an EOL before school, okay? Before school program of EOL, have EOL run it for 3 more blocks during the day, 3 more 2-hour blocks, all right? And then have an after-school EOL program. So yes, you can hit tremendous numbers, but that's not our intention, okay? Just think of all the copying and everything else you have to do if you were to try to do that kind of volume, all right? And it's exhausting to do EOL. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun, but I know that after, 6 groups of doing vocabulary words, I need to catch my breath. We don't want to abuse our EOL staff either.
Have school districts initiated this in the summer and then transitioned this program into the school year? And then how successful, has that
You
been?
mean using it for summer program?
Right,
The
and
only,
then
the only district
continuing.
that has done it is New Haven, because as I think I mentioned
How
to some
has that
folks,
worked?
very well. The reason I mentioned to some folks on the side that we have deliberately not disseminated EOL to too many places, and that's because of staff. This is the EOL staff that you're looking at right now, Dr. Murray and Dr. Brown. And so you can see it's a lot of intense work and even follow-up in the schools. And so we don't want for schools to be doing a sloppy job. We really do want schools to succeed with this program because we want children to succeed. And because of that, we have been deliberate in our efforts not to bring on too many schools and too many districts on board. We have a lot of requests, but we have deliberately not done it. And we also have deliberately done it only in schools that are commerce schools. I mentioned that on Tuesday when I started the presentation, because the schools already have the structures in place. They have the school planning and management team that needs to be in place. They have the parent team. They have the triplets team. They have a comprehensive school plan that they should write the program in. They have hopefully the procedures to do assessment and modification. And importantly, very importantly, they should be following the guidelines, the principles of collaboration, consensus, and no fault. It has to, EOL thrives when the reading room staff really understand and demonstrate those principles. Collaboration among all the staff and with the principal, with the parents. Can you just feel it? You know, collaboration is so crucial to this program. Consensus among the staffs among the different staff at the grade levels about what's important to teach our children, you know, how we need to do this. And no fault, we have to practice no fault with our children in the reading room, with all the children in the school, but particularly our reading room kids. And as I did the presentation Monday too, I talk about the importance of, what am I going to say right now? Relationships. You go, girl. Relationship, relationship, relationship. And that's a Comer thing. I mean, you know, really, Dr. Comer has a way of saying that whereas in real estate, it's location, 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 in education, it's relationship, relationship, relationship. And if schools don't understand that, they can't do EOL. They can do it, but it won't be done very well because 4 kids are working together. They are together every day. If they don't know how to get along, they just won't learn very well. If the facilitator doesn't know how to build good relationships with those kids, it still won't work very well. If the teachers, 6 people in the room, if they're not getting along with each other, they're going to spoil everything in the program, right? So relationship, relationship, relationship. And then the other part of the foundation is what? Development. Developmental pathways, that these kids who are in the reading room, we have to know these kids and understand that they come to us at different developmental stages and phases, and that every day they're going through different developmental tasks and challenges. And so we have to understand all of our children along those 6 pathways. It's not just the cognitive or the intellectual. Some days they're having some social things going on with them. Some days they're psychologically blocked because somebody has just stepped on the doggone last nerve. You know, you sometimes as adults, you have one good nerve left and somebody just stepped right on it at the beginning of the day and you have a bad day for the rest of that day. The same thing happens with our kids, right? One last nerve, and the teacher who started off that morning step on that one last nerve, and that child is shot for the day. But when that child comes to the reading room, I mean, we just help the child to feel better. So the psychological and everything else, behave yourself, and all those other pathways become so important in the reading room. And you see, I don't have to tell you about the language pathway because we're talking about reading. We're talking about having children talk to each other, discuss with each other, and so forth. And the ethical pathway, can you imagine the ethical development of children in the reading room? Just think of all the stations and just think of how you can help to promote students' ethical development at every station through the stories that they're reading and discussing, through the conversations they're having with each other, just in terms of teaching them respect for each other, right and wrong, and so forth. So we have to, we deliberately put EOL in Comer schools because of the structures that are already in place. Go ahead, Jan.
Remember your CIA.
Right. Say what CIA is.
Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment Subcommittee.
Absolutely.
Along with your SPMT, they're very involved with this.
Absolutely. Your Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment Subcommittee. Now, if you don't have one as a subcommittee of your SPMT, you should try to have one. Because this is a team in your school, the committee in your school, that really looks more in-depth at your data. At your data, your curriculum, your instruction, and of course your assessment. And they look so in-depth that if there are some cracks, they need to be able to talk about them and fill them quickly. So your Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment Subcommittee is also very important. And again, because of those structures that are in Comer schools, EOL tends to work better. It can work in any school, it can stand alone, but it just happens to work better in Comer schools. EOL is a terrific program. One of its greatest strengths is also one of its greatest weaknesses, the number of persons that it takes for you to do the program very well. And so you will want to start off with the lowest students. And remember, someone pointed it out yesterday too, I think Emma Kennelly pointed it out, that the kids are not all staying there for the whole year. And so the kids are going to be moving so fast that you will start, say you start next September, you know, in some of the schools where you haven't started yet. next September. By January, you will have some kids who are ready to leave to go back into their regular classroom, and then you have some other kids who will come into the reading room and they will pick up those skills so that they can move on. So you just have to start, regardless of what number it is at the particular grade level, you'd have to start with the lowest kids. That's the best you can do, start with the lowest kids.
Would you say no more than 24 kids?
No more
in
than
a room?
24 in the reading room, because if you have more than that, it's going to be difficult to reach every child,
Remember where we started. If you can touch them, you can teach them. And that's really important. And the other thing is, if you do add the 7th station, if you add the computer station,
Right.
you can up it by 4.
Exactly.
Okay? So, you can, could I conceivably see a room running with 28 students? Yes, of course I can.
Yep.
You have to have those other stations.
You'll have to have the computer station. Right. Yeah. Any other questions? On that note, let me say that it certainly has been a pleasure to have been with you these 2.5 days. I've had, as you saw a while ago, too much fun, just a while ago that is. It's been great in terms of the cognitive and the intellectual aspects of it, but the social aspects and all of that, it's been terrific. So thank you all for coming from far and near. And as you travel back, I am hoping that you'll have a safe trip back. And for those of you who are really ready to start the program, then we are ready to work with you to start it. For those of you who have to go back and present and so forth, then you're not alone still. We will work with you as much as we can to get you whatever you need to go back and do your presentations and so on and so forth. And you have our numbers.
Yeah, just give yourselves a hug again, huh? Thank you. I hope our paths cross again.
Okay.